When humans get too much of a thing, we start behaving kind of weirdly. And that's especially true if that thing used to be scarce. Take food, for example. So for most of human history, food has been a scarce resource. The quest to kind of get that dominated a lot of the waking hours of our ancestors. Today, though, thanks to mass production, food is cheap and abundant. But with that relatively lower price and that abundance, it's also lower quality. And the results are well known. So we now know that sugar kills more people than all forms of war and violence, that there are more people who are obese than people who are starving, and the production system that we've built to generate all that cheap food is slowly but inexorably destroying the environment. The way we eat is unsustainable. And the same is true for information. And information has gone through a similar change to food, except this time it's happened in a single generation. So, for example, as a kid growing up in the 1980s in Johannesburg, I used to love reading. So I'd read everything I could lay my hands on. I'd read the back of cereal packets, and then I'd read street signs. And then when I ran out of my own library books, I would read my sister's Sweet Valley High novels. You'd be horrified at how much I actually know about the lives of Jessica and Elizabeth Wakefield. The idea today that a kid would have enough to read is preposterous, right? I mean, the reason, of course, is that the internet came along. You guys remember the internet, right? The information superhighway. We would surf the web, a place to be curious and to explore and to find out about cool new stuff. For me, the internet was love at first sight, because it meant that I could be whoever I wanted, and it also meant that I could read as much as I liked. And so as I grew up with it, it gave me friendships, it gave me a career. I learned some of the most important questions that I had about what it means to be a human being. Lately, though, it's felt a little bit less like that, the information superhighway, and a little bit more like this. So, sure, it's great that our smartphones are supercomputers, but that also means that the amount of information that we have access to is now orders of magnitude greater than it was just a generation ago. And there's a real sense of motion sickness that accompanies this exponential explosion in information. The German sociologist Hartmut Rosa calculates that since the beginning of the 19th century, the speed of human movement has increased by a factor of 100. The speed of communications has soared by a factor of 10 million, and the speed of data transmission has gone orbital. It has skyrocketed by a factor of 10 billion. And the nature of our relationship to information as a result has changed. So when information was scarce, its value lay in its ability to influence how we behaved or how we thought. Today, though, information is now abundant. And so as it's become more abundant, its value has increasingly become its ability to attract our attention and to give us pleasure. Information has become indistinguishable from entertainment. And so what that means is that most of the information available to us today is cheap and low quality. It is the equivalent of KFC, of corn syrup, and of jelly babies. It's engineered to be addictive. It has little to no long-term nutritional value. It makes us unhealthy, and it makes corporations rich. And just as with junk food, our brains and our bodies just aren't evolutionarily equipped to deal with this. And so instead of making us better informed, it kind of gives us the wrong risk map. Terrorism becomes overrated, chronic stress is underrated. African gangs get their own news graphic, fiscal irresponsibility, relegated to a small column on page 13, or the back end of a website. Coronavirus, everywhere on your screens at the moment. The bad handwriting of doctors, nowhere to be found for the last month, even though in the last month it's killed more people. On average, bad handwriting of doctors kills 7,000 people every year in the United States. Now, am I saying that coronavirus is not dangerous? No, of course not. The World Health Organization has said that it's a global public health emergency. Coronavirus is dangerous. What I am saying is that that constant wall-to-wall coverage is disproportionate to the risk that it actually entails. If it bleeds, it leads isn't an editorial philosophy. It's not a colloquialism coined by some cutthroat tabloid editor. It is a potent evolutionary truth that lies at the heart of the modern-day media machine. And if you don't believe me, check out the statistics. Here, according to Google News, are the most popular news stories from 2019. And it is basically a roll call of the apocalypse. Anybody else feel like the news cycle was insane last year? Yeah. Well, here are the stats. North Korea, plane crashes, Notre Dame, US-China trade war, Huawei and spies, Iran, Mala, mass shootings, Greta's made an appearance there, the 2020 elections. There is one shining light in there, Baby Yoda. Thank God. Everything else is pretty much the apocalypse. So, is that what happened in 2019? Well, no. There were a bunch of other stories out there, but they got lost in the news. And so what I thought I'll do here is I'll show you some stories that I spotted in 2019 that you might not have heard about. I'm going to see if I can do the news from 2019 in less than 4 minutes. If anyone's got a stopwatch in the front of here, let's see if we can get there. All right, 32 stories in less than 4 minutes. Every single story you're about to hear is true, fact-checked, and every single story happened in the last 12 months. In 3, 2, 1. The United Nations reported last year that global AIDS deaths have decreased by 1/3 since 2010, thanks to the rollout of new antiretrovirals and new medicine, and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a new Ebola vaccine is working miracles. Hundreds of thousands of people now are protected, including frontline health workers and children. That's going to save thousands of lives and already has done so. Meanwhile, Algeria and Argentina were declared malaria-free last year, and Malawi eliminated trachoma, the deadliest infectious eye disease in the world. In the United States, they experienced the single biggest year drop in cancer death rates ever in recorded history, and the FDA approved a new drug for cystic fibrosis based on targeting genetic roots of that disease. That's going to change countless lives too. 150 million people got access to electricity in 2019, with places like Kenya and Nepal outpacing even the wildest expectations of experts. And in the largest sanitation drive of all time, India finished building 100 million toilets last year. Looks like humanity might finally be getting its shit together. Global homicide rates, according to a new report that was released last year, are down by 20% since the 1990s. And in April, The Economist reported that the global suicide rate has decreased by 29% since the turn of the century. Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage in May last year, the first Asian country to do so. Botswana and Angola decriminalized homosexuality a month later. And in September, Save the Children announced that 94 million fewer children are now in forced labor since the turn of the century. Oh, also, did you know that last year war deaths decreased to their lowest level in 5 years? Or that deaths from terrorism halved? Naturally, that was front-page news everywhere, right? Germany, more than 40% of refugees who've arrived in the last 5 years now have full-time employment there, and 50% of students in China are now female in high school and in universities. That's up from a quarter in the 1970s. Indonesia banned child marriage last year. Mozambique made it punishable by 12 years in prison. And India and Bangladesh are reporting a 48% drop in child marriage since 1995. Those kids were going to have lives that they would never have previously had before. And 2 billion voters voted last year in 2019, the largest number of voters in human history. So much for the death of democracy. Ethiopia, 350 million trees in 12 hours last year. That was a new world record. They set that in July. In China, in Beijing, they're reporting their lowest level of air pollution in 35 years. And China is also reporting that deserts are shrinking by 2,400 square kilometers a year, that forests are expanding. They now cover 22% of land area. That's the most in recorded history. Last year, in Kenya, elephant poaching was cut in half. And in Tanzania, it almost reached the same levels. And in India, they reported that the population of tigers in the wild has increased by 1/3 since 2014. And in the South Atlantic, a new survey revealed that whale populations are back to 93% of their pre-whaling populations. Belize, doubled the amount of ocean reserves around the second largest barrier reef in the world. South Africa increased the amount of oceans it protects from 0.4% to 5.4%. In Argentina, they created 2 massive new marine reserves off the south coast, one of the most abundant and wildlife-rich areas in the world. And Canada partnered with its indigenous custodians to create the largest marine reserve in that country's history. It means that Canada is the first country in the world to protect more than 10% of its ocean. Every single one of those stories happened in the last 12 months. How did I do? Did I get it in under 4? Great. Now, I'm not saying that the world is some kind of perfect place, okay? Many things are going wrong for humanity. And it's also true that as a species, we are fouling our own nest. Also, I don't want to say that the news is necessarily a terrible thing all the time either. I mean, for many people during the bushfire crisis, the news was a lifeline. In some cases, it quite literally saved lives. However, surely we have to ask ourselves, do we really want to be consumers of a product created by an industry that thinks that the news about a child molesting billionaire is more newsworthy than the fact that 94 million fewer children are in forced labor? So, sure, things feel crazy right now, but remember that if we consume only bad news, we become cynical. It means that we end up folding our arms and tapping our feet and waiting for the next thing to fall. Things have always been crazy. Can you imagine that there was Twitter when this land was stolen from its traditional owners? Can you imagine what it would have been like if Instagram had been around during World War II, or Facebook Live had been around during the Rwandan genocide? What's different today is that software has now eaten the world, and so all of the world's problems get expressed in software. Essentially, we have submitted ourselves to a vast, disorganized global experiment. What happens when you take a brain and a nervous system that are evolved for running away from cheaters, and you show it a big glowing screen with all of the world's problems in near real time? Well, the answer is that you get sick. So, research has shown that reading the news in the morning increases your chances of having a bad day by 27%. When your mind is constantly in the news, you're exposed to all of the planet's suffering, and you don't have agency over that. And so you get this low-grade sense of loss of control, anxiety starts rising, and that now feels normal to us, but it's not normal, and it shouldn't be normal. Visually shocking and upsetting news causes sleeplessness, it raises your cortisol levels, it can even cause PTSD. And when your cortisol levels go up, you get digestion impaired, you get a lack of cell hair and bone growth, and increased infection. So effectively what you're doing is you're shortening your life by reading this stuff. In 2018, this gym chain called Lifetime in the United States, 154 branches, they banned cable news because they said it was antithetical to their idea and their mission of actually making people healthier. Remember, when we pay attention, we pay with the other things that we could have been doing, that heart-to-heart chat that you could have had to your best friend or to your child, that night that you could have slept really well during, that morning that you could have woken up feeling really refreshed. Those are the things we pay with. So we're not just giving away our attention, we're actually giving away our life. For me, though, the thing that really freaks me out about it all is that it literally changes the neurological infrastructure of your brain. The news industry has adopted the tricks of the entertainment industry. And so what they now do is they superimpose drama and narrative onto every single story, and they make it all sound like it's part of one big, massive plot line. A big soap opera. I mean, why do you think politicians come back from scandals and from the dead and suddenly arrive back and they're back again on scene? Why do you think there's a reality television star in the White House? It's because what we've done is we've adopted those tricks of drama, and we're following now hundreds of different plot lines about presidents and plane crashes and Brexits and police brutality. It's like the worst TV show in the world, but we're all watching it. You wouldn't do that for Netflix. You stop the TV show when it gets bad. But for some reason, we don't do it with this. Neuroplasticity kicks in. The more news that we consume, the more we exercise the circuits devoted to following cheap, stupid stories, and the more we ignore those required for deep focus and for proper thinking. The craving becomes harder to ignore. 4 to 5 pages into that book, you put the book down and you get distracted, even if you used to love reading books. Wondering why it's harder to settle down in bed with the book these days in the evening? It's not because you got older or because your schedule's busier. It's because digital media has quite literally changed the infrastructure of your brain. So, that kind of sucks. What do we do? What on earth are we supposed to do about it? Well, what would happen if you changed your information diet? What would happen if you took the advice of Nicole Wong, who says that it's time for a slow food movement for the internet? Well, that's exactly what I did. About 2 or 3 years ago, I decided that I'd fallen out of love with the internet. You see, I curate and I talk about information for a living. I run a company called Future Crunch, and what we do is we try to investigate the impact of disruptive technologies on society. So I'm on the internet, I rely on it for a living. But I realized that the information superhighway that I'd loved as a kid had kind of been buried beneath the noise, giving me a really horrible case of indigestion. So I decided to change my information diet, and the results for me have been absolutely transformative. I feel less stressed, I feel less anxious. That phone doesn't feel like a millstone around my neck. My laptop isn't always open on the tram or at home or in the office. I have time now. I didn't cut out all of the bad stuff either. I didn't sort of just go on a totally information-free diet. I mean, midnight ice cream is one of life's great pleasures, and so is binge watching the reality television show from the White House. So you fall off the bandwagon every now and again. But what I try to do is I try to say to myself, given how important professional athletes think about their recovery, and V, you talked about that in the previous session, what would happen if I dedicated recovery time to someone who uses their mind for a living in the same way? And so what I thought I would do here today with you for the next 10 or 11 minutes is I thought I would share with you how I did that and how I actually changed my information diet. Now, this is not a definitive guide. I mean, my information intake is excessive. So I'm not suggesting that you should do the same as me. What I'm hoping here is that by showing you the broad brushstrokes, you can actually go out there and curate your own. Sound good? Okay. Step number 1, you need a dietary philosophy. People who eat in a certain way have a philosophy about how they eat. They're vegan, or they're Ayurvedic, or they're paleo, or they're vegetarian. They have an idea of what their eating philosophy is, and the same is true for your information diet. And so what I decided to do was craft my information diet philosophy around this quote from legendary kids entertainer Mr. Rogers from the United States. When I was a boy and I'd see the scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And so using that as my criteria, I decided to craft my information diet around science. Because science, I think, is the biggest driver of human progress. Science as a verb, not as a noun. It's not the truth, but it's a really great compass to getting to the truth. For me, science is the most helpful thing humans have ever invented. And sometimes it can be scary because science tells us that, we're heating up the planet and that the superbug could wipe us out and that an asteroid could end all life as we know it. But even that's a sign of progress because it means that as a species, we are facing up to the challenges in full view. It means that we are looking at the world with a sense of curiosity and wonder, and it means that we're identifying our problems to try and to solve them. Science news is the most helpful news that I can find on the internet. So that's how I've crafted my information diet. Now, I'm not saying that your philosophy should be about science. Maybe you want to make it about creativity, or maybe it can be a spiritual approach to how you consume the internet, or maybe it's just a fully commercial edge. That's great, whatever you want to do. The point here is that you give yourself a guideline, a post in the sand, and then you can steer towards that. Step number 2, throw away the keys to the cookie jar. I have no self-control over digital media. I am a digital media addict, and it was quite good to actually be able to admit that to myself. For me, it's not a cookie jar. For me, it's the alcohol cabinet. And it actually has the same kind of effect. I cannot resist. If the alcohol cabinet is open, I'm going to go start rooting around in there. So here's how I did it. The way I did it is I thought, I need to turn my phone back into something that's actually useful, a tool that I can use. And so what I thought is I need to get rid of the black holes on the phone, the things where I just get sucked in and the whole world comes at me. So the first thing I did is I deleted all the social media on my phone. I know that sounds totally extreme, but do you really need social media on your phone? Can you not check most of your social media maybe on your laptop? I know it's extreme, but it helped me a lot. And then what I did is I then deleted email on my phone. Well, that's a little more extreme. But do you need to answer every single email within 30 seconds or a minute that you get it? Can you not answer email when you're in the office and that you have access to your laptop, and then when you leave the office, you close it, and that's done, and you're no longer getting email coming in at you and demands on your time, no longer getting those notifications? Well, it helped me. And then you delete the internet. What? That is ridiculous. But again, I don't need to be on the internet 24 hours a day. And also, everyone else is on the internet. So if I really need to find something, I can just ask someone if I can borrow their phone and I can look it up. That's called a collective action problem, by the way. What that meant is it meant that the internet is now something that I actively choose to engage with rather than something that comes at me 24 hours a day. I then kept all the things on my phone that I call magical spells. So apps that a generation ago, even 10 years ago, would have felt like magic. I can now summon a car whenever I want. Food can arrive at my doorstep. I can tell the weather for 7 days in advance straight away. I can transfer money around like magic around the world. I've got photos going all the way back to 7 or 8 years ago, a calendar that tells me what I'm doing. My phone is now a useful tool again. My phone now feels again like a magical object, something that doesn't feel like a millstone, but something that feels like a Swiss Army knife. Final step here, and this is the most important step, is that once you've developed your philosophy, once you've thrown away the keys to the liquor cabinet or the cookie jar, depends on your level of addiction, you need to change your diet. And the way to do that is to identify your dietary food groups. So start with books. Books are a fantastic way to learn stuff because books give you access and understanding of the deeper forces that are moving our world, not the immediate stuff. They give you access to deeper thinking and to a broader perspective. Books are a fantastic way to make sense of the world, and they give you an edge because everyone else is reading that fast food content. Books are also a really great way to relax. If you're feeling anxious, reading a book, according to the University of Sussex, reduces your stress levels by an average of 68%. Forget listening to classical music. Forget a cup of tea or taking a walk. Read a book, because it means that you lose yourself in another world. It means your imagination gets transported, and it means all the anxieties about your immediate environment disappear. You are quite literally being present in another person's thoughts or in another person's imagination. The next thing to do is to identify the thing that's really going to kind of give you your edge. You need your main dietary food group, your veggies, your greens. You need to eat them. And for me, that's email newsletters. Email newsletters for me are a wonderful way to get information because the thinkers who put them together are not relying on readership and attention getting, they're relying on quality in order to retain readership. And the other thing that I love about email newsletters is I can follow individuals rather than companies or brands. And I don't have to worry about what those individuals' hot takes are on Twitter. I can think about I can look at their deeper thinking, and I can see the articles that they're looking at as well. Here's what Craig Modd says about the increase in email newsletters. He says, as social media siloed off chunks of the open web, sucking up attention, the energy that was once put into blogging has now shifted to email newsletters. So if you're not part of this revolution, it's time to get on board. Some of the best thinking in the world is now being done in private, in people's inboxes, instead of on the open web. I'm not going to go through the list of all the newsletters that I love, but here's a link if you want to have a look at the newsletters. And in fact, all of the information that I'm telling you over here gives you the whole rundown. And that's our Twitter handle. We tweeted at, I think, 1:41. I'll link to that, so you can easily find it and you can use that. Please don't subscribe to all the newsletters I do. Your inbox will explode. Choose 3. Evolve it over time. Unsubscribe if you don't like the email newsletter. Find new ones. Evolve your thinking. Then you need some more minerals, and that could be podcasts. Now, I don't listen to podcasts that much because I'm a visual learner. I'm not an auditory learner. So it really just depends on your learning style. I like podcasts. If someone recommends one to me, I'll normally listen to it, but I don't immediately gravitate towards that. If you are an auditory learner, then maybe podcasts are your veggies, and then maybe email newsletters are your fruit. I don't know. You decide it. Choose your own adventure. And then you need a secret ingredient, and for me, that's Reddit. What? Reddit? It's like the junkyard of the internet. But the thing about Reddit is that everyone's there. So the quality of debate is higher than anywhere else. The questions being asked are great. The curation is fantastic. You're never going to miss anything out. And also the flame wars are worse, and people are nastier on Reddit. It's kind of like where everybody is. But what you can do is you can sift through the information. You can subscribe to the subreddits that you really like. And again, if you don't like it, unsubscribe, find new ones. You'll eventually find a community that you like. There are moderators on there. And finally, let's talk about the junk food, news and social media. When it comes to news, I like to engage with it, but I only give myself about 10 minutes a day. So I use an app called Freedom. There are many other apps. I've given the details to that at that link that I posted. And then what it means is that the news enters my consciousness for 10 minutes a day, and then it's gone and it disappears. Social media, LinkedIn, it's like the roadside cafe on the information superhighway. I hate LinkedIn. It is mostly self-promotional drivel, which is what it's built for, so I totally get it. But I understand you might need to be on LinkedIn. So, use it for what it's useful for. Don't scroll. No more motivational coaching videos. Use it to maintain your contacts and improve your business network. And if you have to push content up, well, that's fine. Facebook. There is no healthy way to consume Facebook. It's the Burger King and the McDonald's of the internet. It's okay to have a binge every now and again and eat it, but the best way to actually engage with Facebook is to use a newsfeed eradicator, where you get rid of your entire newsfeed. And again, the details are up at that link. It means that when I go to Facebook now, I just use it for messaging and for events and staying in touch with friends. I don't have to worry about what everybody else is doing. And Twitter, again, curating your feeds, thinking about how you engage with Twitter. I don't actually look at a newsfeed on Twitter anymore either. Twitter is there for me to follow 5 or 6 different thinkers. And anyway, most of my favorite thinkers are doing their best work on email newsletters and podcasts now. So I don't really need Twitter as much anymore. Instagram's like heroin for me. There's no safe way for me to consume it, so I just don't. Instagram's gone, and it's fine. My life's still okay. So that's it. That's my information diet. It changes, it evolves. Sometimes friends send me little treats, little videos, things that I open up. It's okay to fall off the bandwagon, You suddenly find yourself 2 weeks later and you're just like eating chips the whole time. And then you look in the change room and you're like, oh my God, the lighting is harsh in this place. And what? My waistline looks terrible. And so when you realize that, just get back on the bandwagon again and craft your information diet a little bit. It's just like the same as following the diet.